Joe Phillips is a commentator and has been a regular guest on Backstory. Welcome back, Joe. I mean, what a dark week for so many people.
Absolutely. And I think it has perhaps taken some of us by surprise, the level and depth of sentiment, not just amongst the public, but also from world leaders around the globe who've paid extraordinarily tributes to Her Majesty. I mean, not least of all, your own compatriot Justin Trudeau and Francois Macron, France's Emmanuel Macron, who talked about she wasn't your queen, she was the queen. And I think, what you've got is this sense of this person who has been around for such a long time, who's seen so many presidents, prime ministers, leaders of multiple countries and faiths. And it's a bit of a shock, I think.
Why do I think that there's a lot more at play here, and I'll let you give your opinion on than longevity? That she appealed to people on a lot of different levels.
Yes, I think part of it was because she was woven into the fabric of our everyday lives. So, her face was on our banknotes, on our coins. Pictures of the Queen were in every public building, from libraries to council offices to hospitals and what have you. And, any town in the country and around the world, will have got a plaque somewhere opened by Her Majesty the Queen. She was also, I think, the most photographed and filmed living person until her death last week, because she had been photographed when she was born and then constantly around the world on various tours and so on and so forth. So I think it was somebody, she was there, she was just ever present, but she was never sort of in your face. She was a constant and a calm presence, I suppose. Presidents come and go. We've seen Trump, we've seen Clinton, we've seen the Bushes. Here we've got prime ministers come and go. And she has just been there all the time. And I think what has come across is the great respect and regard that people had for the Queen. Not least, closer to home, closer to the UK, in how she dealt with the Northern Ireland peace process. And the fact that when she went there, she wore an emerald green outfit, she shook hands with the Sinn Féin leader Martin McGuinness, and all of those small gestures with so few words spoke volumes to so many people.
I mean, she's the Queen, so one would expect she had a healthy view of herself. But I mean, people say that didn't come across, that she was very focused in public appearances and anywhere that she went, whether it was a hospice or an opening of a new school, or that she was very focused on giving to the people in front of her, and a completely neutral political character who just went out of her way in a very, even during Brexit, which was no easy navigation for her with Parliament deadlocked. She managed always to sidestep the political issues and stay very, very neutral during all of this.
Yeah, and I think that's why people hold her in such high regard. I mean, who knows what her real views were about Brexit or about Scottish independence? We can only guess. There's only rumour and speculation. Who can guess what she thought about the various heads of state that she's had to entertain at Buckingham Palace over the years for state banquets and great state occasions, and those people, who she's had to visit in the Commonwealth and elsewhere. But that thing about, saying little has really sort of borne out, I think, because we're so used to hearing everybody's opinions as soon as they've even been formed on Twitter and social media. And we know politicians are very quick to come out with their opinions. But in a way, that sort of mystery wrapped in an enigma made her much more powerful. So those little gestures, from the clothes she wore, the jewelry she wore, and as you say, she always went out of her way and recognized that people had gone to a lot of trouble. It meant a huge deal to them, whether they'd been queuing in the rain or, standing on aching feet, as I'm sure she used to put up with. But she had that beaming smile. She was a great giver to people, because I think she understood that people would remember their meeting with her or their encounter with her for the rest of their lives.
And a great unifying figure. Would you comment today, as we watched the casket leave Buckingham Palace, and then you saw the two princes, William and Harry, walking behind the King Charles, and Prince Harry wasn't in a uniform and wasn't allowed to wear his uniform. What's the dynamic at play then?
Who knows what the dynamic is? I mean, Harry, I feel, has brought this on himself. And it will be interesting to see whether his memoirs, which are due out next month, actually do come out. Because, like all families, there are tensions and there are rifts, and then, somebody marries somebody else, and, there's all of that sort of thing. I think there's no doubt that Harry, he has been a troubled soul, and I think he was very happy when he was in the army. He then met Meghan, decided to make a life in America. And has burned a lot of bridges, I think, with the royal family. I think his father, the king, has tried to extend an olive branch. He mentioned Harry and Meghan in his speech on the night of the Queen's death. But, you can't do this and stand united if you've got a bombshell autobiography or memoir coming out in a few weeks' time, laying bare or laying claim to things that were said, weren't said, might have been misinterpreted, because you just stir it all up again. And, you would think, wouldn't you, that actually now's the time to say, actually, I'm not going to publish.
Do you believe the printed reports that, in fact, King Charles asked them to come outside of Balmoral Castle, and that's when they did the walkabout, the two princes and their wife?
Yes, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, I think, there's a point where, although it's a soap opera that is of interest to some people, this is an event of great magnitude. It has constitutional implications for the king. And actually, it's a time when you show unity. I mean, this is what people are supposed to do at funerals and during a period of mourning. And I'm quite sure that King Charles, as we have to get used to saying, would have said something either kindly, or would have said, bang your heads together, for goodness sake, it's not about you, it's about your grandmother.
You obviously had a lot of respect for the Queen. Do you feel the same way about your king now?
No. Although I think that generally people have warmed to him over the years. I think, for him, it's very difficult, Dana. He's 73 years old. He's been waiting to do this job from the day he was born. So he's been the longest living apprentice in the world for a job that only he can do. I think, people have seen more of him as the Queen's frailty became more apparent over the last couple of years, and the rest of the senior members of the royal family took on more of her duties. So I think people have warmed him, and I think, you could see that in the very warm reception that he got at the Platinum Jubilee back in the early summer. But I don't think people will feel the same, just simply because he's not the Queen, and the Queen came from a different age. And to a certain extent, we were brought up to respect the royal family. People who are now sort of youngsters, as King Charles succeeds to the throne, are not necessarily going to have that same backdrop of that sort of post-war deference.
Are you familiar with the term "the firm" when it applies to the royal family, and how do you break that down for us? Because there's quite an article in the New York Times today about King Charles, his finances and the taxes that he's avoided and the empire that he's built.
Yeah, and those things will continue to come and haunt him. There was, I think, a certain degree of deference towards the Queen, which is not going to be shown to Prince Charles, King Charles. The firm is what, the royal family refer to themselves as, and the Queen always said, the firm comes first. In other words, it's that continuity, it's that sense of duty, above and beyond everything else, whether it's, whatever's going on in your
So this is
marital.
not, when you hear the term the firm, to me, that sounds like the business environment of the royal family, the empire, the business empire.
No, I think you're thinking of succession. That's a totally different thing. No, I think it's much more about, this is an organization, if you like. I don't think it's so much about the finances and the business side of it, but I do think it is about the brand, if you like to put it in those sort of terms, even though it's not a sort of commercial thing. And, there are lots and lots of things that are going to happen in the next couple of years. All of those brands, whether they're dog biscuits or Wellington boots, that were by royal appointment, will no longer have the right to have that crest within 2 years. So the king will have to decide who his suppliers are. And there are questions about the immense wealth, the income from the Duchy of Duchy of Cornwall, the fact that he's not going to pay any tax on inheritance, and all of those things. And there is a sense, now may not be the time for people to voice it, but Thomas Keneally, the Australian Republican and writer, wrote a piece in The Guardian today, and it is a very articulate argument for republicanism. And I think Prince Charles, as he was not hugely popular. I think there were various revelations. I think people have largely forgiven him for Princess Diana, and Camilla, his now Queen consort, is actually, I think, very well respected, and people feel warmly towards her. But I don't think he will have the same degree of public affection that his mother had.
So he gets a honeymoon period, especially now, because before he's the king, he is still just a son who is mourning the loss of his mother. But all of these debates, and some of them will be quite substantial, are to come, and will affect his image with the British public, especially in a recession when people can't afford heat at home. Things like, not being taxed on your inheritance in the millions of dollars. It'll be interesting how it plays out in the British public.
Yeah, absolutely. And, and in the Commonwealth, I mean, we know that there are several countries in the Commonwealth who want to have a referendum on independence quite soon. Australia has said they won't do it for a little while, but we do need to have the debate. And if we're not going to have it now during this period, because to a certain extent, the king is 73. In a way, he's a transition between his mother and that continuity towards his son, William. Because clearly King Charles is not going to be on the throne for 70 years. So it's actually how he behaves and how he presents himself. I mean, he has spoken in the past of not living in Buckingham Palace, but opening it to the public. I think the fact that he and Camilla have done this sort of whistle-stop tour of the United Kingdom has done quite a lot to say, the union of the United Kingdom is very, very important. And I think, it's how he behaves, again, probably how William and Kate, the new Prince and Princess of Wales, behave, and whether we see a sort of, if you like, a slimmed down royal family with, far fewer hangers on. I mean, a lot of them have sort of disappeared over the years and have been slightly edged out. But you've got to move quickly, because, as you say, it's a honeymoon period and it won't last long. And once we get into the winter, with the cost of living crisis facing people, and of course, very, very unfortunate timing that people who work at Clarence House were told yesterday that they might lose their jobs because the king
This was King Charles's residence, right?
That's right. Yeah. So that's his previous residence, which now is no longer. It may go to somebody else eventually.
Sorry, I interrupted you. They were told
that some of their jobs will be going. Now, anybody would have advised anybody in any company around the world that wasn't the best timing.
Just wait.
Yeah, just wait. You know, don't do it, because it just fuels that anger and that sense of, oh yes, it's all a pageant and it means nothing. I mean, you know, I don't think that's necessarily true. I think there is a genuine affection for the Queen. I think there is a genuine respect
Yeah.
for what she stood for. How long that will last remains to be seen.
Yeah. Well, and you can take the temperature of that of that just by watching people, you know, standing in line for hours and hours and hours, you know, in 4 and 5 mile lines around
Yeah,
Westminster to go and view the coffin. So,
yeah.
Joe Phillips, thank you so much for guiding us through a little bit of this, and we appreciate your insight.